Good morning. It's Reverend Mike Capron from the First Presbyterian Church of Troy. This morning I'll be preaching on the book of Ruth in the Bible, chapter 1. I would recommend that you read the entire chapter, but I'm going to quote a few sections of it in the sermon, so I'm going to dive right in. The book of Ruth can be read a lot of ways. It can be a sweet little romance. It can be a story of hardship and tragedy. It can even be a story about the vulnerability and exploitation of women in the ancient world. For these two sermons, I'm going to read it as an allegory. I'll give more details on that later. The primary character in chapter 1 is not Ruth, but Naomi. Naomi's family is a typical one. At the start of the story, she and her husband and their two sons are doing okay in the town of Bethlehem, south of Jerusalem. Then there comes a time of natural disaster, a famine. There wasn't enough food to eat. One of our modern criteria for famine is when 30% of the children in a region are suffering from severe malnutrition. Famine can be caused by environmental problems, drought, storms, climate change. Famine can also be caused by human beings. War is the most common cause. By the way, we either have famine in Gaza and Sudan today, or we're extremely close to it. Please continue to pray for those war-torn areas. Back to the Bible. Naomi and her family don't have enough to eat, so they leave home and become refugees. They hear there is food in the pagan area of Moab to the east, so they go there. It goes pretty well. They are able to survive. Their two sons grow up, fall in love with local girls, and marry them. Perhaps Naomi and her husband would have preferred them to marry girls of the same religion, but what are you going to do? Then about 10 years into our story, a new series of tragedies strikes. Naomi's husband, the father of the two boys, dies. Then the eldest son dies. Then the younger son dies. I don't even understand how Naomi is functioning at this point, but eventually she decides to return to Bethlehem. This leads to the famous scene in chapter 1 where the women who had married her sons, her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, declare that they want to go with her. It is a testament to the affection these young widows have for Naomi, that they are willing to leave their home and go to this land they do not know. You will have to read chapter 1 for yourself to get all the details, but I love the way Naomi handles this. She gives them some very sensible reasons why they should go back to their parents right here in Moab. They should find new husbands and have new families. She blesses them, hoping that the Lord will be kind to them and wishing them well. Orpah listens to Naomi, kisses her goodbye, and returns to Moab. Ruth does not. Instead, she makes this amazing declaration. Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. So then this interesting thing happens as Naomi and Ruth make their way to Bethlehem and enter the town. Everyone was surprised and excited. Wow, it's Naomi! They probably thought she died in the famine. And they gather around calling her name. But she tells them, don't call me Naomi, but Mara. Now to understand, you have to know that the name Naomi means pleasant. And the name Mara means bitter. So these verses would read like this. Don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. For bitter indeed has the Almighty made my life. Full was I when I went away, but empty as the Lord brought me back. Why do you call me pleasant when the Lord has spoken against me and the Almighty has brought disaster upon me? Fans of the book of Job might notice some similarity here in Naomi's speech. Back in her hometown, she is flooded with memories of her childhood, of her wedding, full of hope and celebration, of the birth of her sons, now dead. Realization of how much she has lost overwhelms her, and it all comes flooding out. Grief can be like that. We have a moment of calm, and then another wave breaks over us. Naomi is hurt, sad, and angry. Who's she angry at? Well, God. Sometimes people get a little shocked when I talk about us being angry at God. They worry about it. But it's so important in all our relationships. When you're feeling angry with someone, it's okay to take a walk, collect yourself, and let the dust settle. But the relationship is in real danger if you completely cut off and stop talking long term. And it's the same way with God. Lots of people in the Bible become angry or frustrated with God, usually about something God did or something God failed to prevent. This is not really troubling or surprising, and since it does not turn into cutoff, it's fine. It's a good sign that Naomi mentions God 6 times in 22 verses. She is still talking about the Lord. They will work it out eventually. More about that next week. And I promised to tell you about my allegory, which is like a comparison or a metaphor. A common way for Christians to think about the Old Testament is to view the Christian church as the new Israel. I'm going to run with that in these 2 sermons, thinking about Israel as the church universal and thinking about Bethlehem in the time of Ruth as this congregation here in Troy. Now, I'm going to speak about First Presbyterian Troy, Pennsylvania, but a lot of what I say may apply to any church, so I'm hoping that's the case for you out there in internet land. So to the people in Troy, I say, where this comparison works for you, go with it. And where I've gotten something wrong, just ignore me. So here's the story of the last few decades here at First Presbyterian Troy as I have come to know it. You didn't have a famine, but back in the 1990s, you had what I think could be termed an actual split, where a lot of your members left. Some of them went to other local churches, which in my allegory is like going to other towns in Israel. They were still within the Lord's domain. I assume that some others stopped going to church altogether. That would be like exiting Israel and going to Moab. But even in Moab, you meet some nice people like Orpah and Ruth. Back here at First Presbyterian, Troy, the smaller group continues to face a lot of challenges. You had some bad luck with some interim pastors who died. Your attendance and donations both dropped to a dangerous level, and you were within a hair's breadth of closing your doors about 5 years ago. You have had a remarkable comeback since that time. Attendance is up, giving is up. You are providing needed things to the community, such as dinners, concerts, coats, and music lessons. I could be wrong, but it looks like a lot of your growth has come through the return of people who used to be here. Some have probably come back hurting from what they found out there, like Naomi. There are 3 things that are remarkable about Naomi's return. First, she doesn't keep things bottled up inside. She just talks about what's going on with her. She feels bitter about all the tragedy God has sent her way. Second, she and Ruth have come back destitute. They have nothing, but they are still welcomed with open arms. That is a beautiful witness the church can give. We value people, as children of God, not for what they can do for us or our institution. Third, Naomi does come back with something really valuable. She comes back with relationships from outside our typical territory in Moab. She has a relationship with Orpah, who made a sensible decision to go back to her parents. She did not choose to come to Israel, to the territory of the Lord, but perhaps that will change. Perhaps Orpah will show up one day. That would be a wonderful thing. We can still be friends with her, even if she doesn't, but we would rather that she come on in and share our joy in the Lord. The newcomer to Bethlehem, Ruth, is wonderful. She has seen Naomi's faith, bruised as it is, and recognized it as something she wants. She is committed. She is on the journey of faith. Remember what Ruth said? Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Sometimes I think this story ought to be in our Bibles as the book of Naomi, but when I reread that, I understand why it's the book of Ruth. We need a lot of women and men who share some of these traits with Ruth. Ruth knows enough about God to want to know more. She also wants to live out this life of faith. Ruth is, say, 20 years younger than Naomi. One of the beautiful things about church is that it can be a place where diverse groups gather. The joining together of people who are of different races, generations, and even political opinions is rare in our society, and probably becoming rarer. We must strive to preserve that kind of space. As we continue the story next week, we will also see that Ruth is willing to work. She just needs some guidance from Naomi about how to do it. I'm impressed with the dedication of the people in this church. Truth be told, a fair number of PCUSA and other mainline congregations come off as a little depressed. You don't seem depressed. On the contrary, there's a can-do, optimistic spirit about this place that I find very refreshing. I'm inspired by you and by what God is doing here. In fact, I have only one real criticism. You're probably a little too good at doing things for others. It's a testament to your dedication and ability, but it isn't going to help us grow as a church. Doing things for others is great, but doing things with others is better. We need to constantly look for opportunities to invite other people to work with us. We're good about that with our musical programs and the community dinners that we partner with other groups on. But if the same 2 to 3 people are doing the coat giveaway next year, we will still be giving out coats, but we want to become a stronger church. If our events committee, which meets on the third Mondays, still has all the same people next year, we'll have had some great events, but we won't be a stronger church. If our organist is still doing all the same amazing list of things he is doing to do with our music program and many, many other things that he does next year and hasn't found a way to hand anything off, we probably haven't become a stronger church. Growing churches obsess over this question: who outside the church can we invite to participate? This is not who can we do something for, but who can we do something with? Because whether someone has come to faith like Ruth or has not yet, like Orpah, most people have some capacity and desire to serve, and they want the feeling of community that comes from serving with other people. It is often quicker and simpler to just do it ourselves. That's the trap. That is what keeps us locked into a small circle of insiders. We, all of us, have to actively, consciously, intentionally work to avoid that trap. And it is hard work, harder than just doing it ourselves. And it's so much easier to stay in our comfort zone, right? I feel like I found a mode of preaching that most of the people in Troy appreciate. It works well for people of a certain age and education level. If we get some new faces in here from different backgrounds, I will have to adapt. I promise it won't be dull, but it will be different. I remember how I used to preach as the interim pastor at First Presbyterian in Ogden, New York. That church had a lot of middle school students. When my interim work was done and I was leaving, people were saying nice things about my ministry. My proudest moment was when a group of middle schoolers told me how much they liked my sermons. That probably meant more to me than everything all the adults said. It's part of the call of a pastor to adapt to the changing needs of a changing flock. You've all shown amazing resilience and fortitude as a congregation. I feel really fortunate to be a part of this church at this moment in your history. I will prayerfully and carefully do what I can to adapt and do what is needed. I know that you will do the same because as a congregation, we are not bitter. We are loving and hopeful, and we look forward to what God will do next, to figuring out how we can participate with God and inviting others to participate with us. Amen. God bless.